Hello, this is a look through the player cards of the first pack of the Dwarrowdelf cycle for the Lord of the Rings living card game, the Redhorn Gate. We're going to have a look just through the player cards because I don't want to spoil any of the quests, just to see how they fit in with the game, sort of where it currently is. I've played to the end of the second cycle. I haven't played anything beyond that, so there might be synergies in the future that I'm not aware of, but this is really just a commentary almost on if you've got this pack, just this pack and everything that came before it, or really maybe this pack and what's coming up in the second cycle. Because we start off with our hero, Elrohir, which my Lord of the Rings mad friend was very excited to see, because Elrohir and Elladan are like the twin sons of Elrond, and whereas Arwen gets to be in the movies, and then I don't know if Elladan and Elrohir, they're probably mentioned in the books or something. But they're not in the films, and they're probably like one of the most fan-loved characters not to be in the films, and they're pretty badass, of course, because they're elves. So Elrohir is a 10 starting threat, 2 will, 2 attack, 1 defense, 4 hit points. Noldor, which suddenly now becomes really important in this cycle. Noble and Ranger, which currently means nothing. While Elladan is in play, Elrohir gets +2 shield, taking up to 3 defense. And response, after Elrohir is declared as a defender, pay 1 resource from his resource pool to ready him. Right, so seemingly, not unbelievable stats, because he has a dash of everything with a weak defense but lots of hit points, until his brother's in play. And that doesn't mean that you have to take Elladan and Elrohir. One of you could take Elladan and one of you could take Elrohir. So that's pretty cool. At which point Elrohir goes from a 1 defense, 4 hit points, into 3 defense, 4 hit points, which puts him up there with Denethor in terms of defense, and yet has more hit points. He also has the ability to continually defend, provided that you've got resources to spend, which gives him the holiest of hero abilities, multi-use. Aragorn and Prince Imrahil, both from the leadership sphere, are both proponents of this excellent effect, and it means that the higher threat of these heroes, and Elrohir is the lowest of those 3, can be mitigated by fulfilling the work of more than one character. Elrohir helps keep your allies alive as well, since you can actually use a hero to multi-block, which lets your allies either attack or support or quest, which, rather than just having to throw them as sacrificial lambs, you can instead hold those ones back for when you really need a defense against an attack that perhaps might even risk Elrohir. It also means that there's lots of allies who sometimes have to be used as chump blockers, but it's really only those snowball and scouts and those instant use and now I have no more purpose allies that you want to use in that way. So this lets you be a bit more adventurous with your allies. Elrohir obviously loves attachments such as the Dunedain's warnings to take his defense even higher. Steward of Gondor on him so he can generate even more resources. And then outside his sphere, obviously self-preservation means that even when that gets through his 3 defense, he'll be able to heal it up pretty much instantly and let it go forever. And if you can somehow give him a lore icon, like through Song of Wisdom, and give him the Burning Brand so that you can cancel shadow cards, he is an absolute godlike defender. However, all of this is predetermined on the idea that you're also playing Elladan, which meant at the release of this pack, Elrohir was a bit naff since Elladan didn't come out to the next one, but that's then and this is now. This is a level of enforced deck building on a hero level that we haven't really seen in the Lord of the Rings card game up until now. But these are 2 hugely loved figures, who are twins, and so such heavy-handedness seems appropriate. Now it's important to remember that you have to take both, but they also both have to be alive. This is harder for Elrohir, obviously, since he's the defender, whereas Elladan's the attacker. My friend has been running a Legolas, Elrohir, Elladan deck, which has... And whenever we've had a character die to an unforeseen effect, such as like Gollum biting during Return to Mirkwood, or the Hummer Horns or something like that, you can't kill Elrohir or Elladan without ruining the other one's effect, which then means, well, you've almost got 1.5 heroes left, which means Legolas has had to be dying. So this can sometimes force you've got to keep both of them alive. I mean, obviously, usually in a quest, if a hero is dying, something's gone seriously wrong anyway, but it is something to consider. Right then, so we'll go on to the actual player cards now. That was a very long description of Elrohir, but I do think he's worth the description since he is a really cool hero, and you can really build when you say build a deck around Elrahir and Eladan, it just basically means taking both of them. Right then. So the first card we have is a tactics card, Keeping Count, which is like absolutely awesome artwork because it's one of those cool pieces that you glance at and it's like, oh, it's a shield, and then you see like all the tally marks inside, and it calls back to that really cool idea in the book where Legolas and Gimli are having that contest. You attach it to a hero. You can only have one on each hero. The attached hero gets +1 attack for each resource token on another copy of Keeping Count that is above the current number of resource tokens on this card, and forced, after attached hero attacks and destroys an enemy, place 1 resource token on this card. So what this really means is you put this on 2 or 3 different heroes, and the more kills those heroes get, the more resources go on this card, resource tokens go on this card, and then the difference between the tokens on the different characters' cards increases their attack. So if you've got Legolas and Gimli, and Legolas has been popping goblins, and he's got 3 tokens on this, and Gimli has a copy of this, and it has 0 tokens, Gimli now has +3 attack, because that's the difference between the two. It's very thematic, of course, but it only works if you have 2, which makes it very rarely usable. It relies also on that because you've got to find 2 copies of this attachment in a Lord of the Rings deck, which are always huge, and it's tactics, which typically isn't the most drawing of decks. It also relies on there being 2 attackers in one party, or 2 people who you would want to attack, which can be difficult to manage. I mean, it's okay if, for instance, in our group, like I said, with that Legolas, Eladan and Elrahir party, he takes care of all the attacking and the defending, and I do everything else. So the Keeping Count could work, and it is actually a pretty cool idea on Eladan and Elrahir, except, of course, well, Elrahir is never going to be attacking. The one good thing about it, in terms of needing both of them, I suppose, is that you can have one come out early, that character kills a lot of things, ends up with 5, 6 tokens on here, then you find your other copy, attach it to a different hero, and suddenly that hero is now +6 attack. So it could be one of those really like clutch, like, oh my gosh, we're screwed, we can't kill this unless, oh my god, it's Keeping Count. And it is worth mentioning, of course, with Khazad-Dum, with those swarms of goblins, you can be killing so many things that, you know, tokens can get on this. It's one of those cards that you really include in your deck, and you just cross your fingers that the one game where it actually kicks in is going to be amazing. So, next one is Unseen Strike. I really wish I had a better webcam to do the art on these cards justice, because that is just awesome. Unseen Strike is it's a 0 cost event with the action choose a character you control. Until the end of the phase, that character gets +3 attack when attacking an enemy with a higher engagement cost than your threat. So 0 cost events are always good because they can be played in any situation. The problem, of course, is that this card is situational. It depends on there being enemies that are actually above your engagement, of course. So making a lower starting threat or threat reduction necessary to really get the most out of this card. A +3 attack is a deadly amount to add to a card. I mean, you take an average attacker of 2, you add 3 to it and it's 5, and that's absurd. With your Legolases, that's 6, and that's killing most enemies in one shot. It is worth noting as well that in the subsequent pack, when Eladan comes out, who can, in the same way that Elrahir can defend multiple times, Eladan can attack multiple times. Unseen Strike would mean that if you were attacking multiple enemies with a higher engagement cost, he would get that each time, which is crazy because he's already a 3 attacker, so that would be like 6 attack on multiple enemies. I've also seen this used. This is one of these ones that does double up really nicely. I've seen somebody one-shot a troll by playing 2 of these at the same time, which got his Legolas to 9, and then just needed to throw in like a little bit extra, and that troll was gone. And it was one of those, engage at 29. He's 30. Really good if you've got a spirit player on the table, so he can keep your threat ticking down, or Gandalf's or something like that. But obviously, it can be one of those horrible cards that when your threat climbs up and the quest is getting tight, and your one draw for the turn is Unseen Strike, it's just a complete waste. But it does also key in quite nicely with what we're just about to talk about. One of the new mechanics that came out this cycle, which is Secrecy. So the first lore card of this cycle is Needful to Know, and it's our friend Elrond, who's actually going to be a hero later in the cycle, which is pretty awesome. Oh my gosh. So this card has Secrecy 2 on it, so let's quickly just discuss Secrecy, because that is like the new thing this cycle. Secrecy means that if your threat is 20 or lower, that you discount the cost of the card equal to the secrecy number on the card. So in this instance, like needful to know is secrecy 2, which means that if your threat is 20 or lower, you discount 2 from the cost, so the card only costs nothing to play. That's brilliant, and like it's a really cool idea. Oh, we know our threat's so low, we're like sneaking past Sauron, a bit like if you made a party that was just Frodo and Sam, and you were trying to drop a ring in a mountain. Your threat would be so low with just those 2 heroes that it would almost be like secretive and whatever, and it's like the hobbits at the start of the Fellowship. The problem is secrecy is so freaking hard to achieve. Actually getting a party that starts with its threat, even at 20, is very hard to do. I mean, you are discounting all of the big heroes. I mean, Elra here, starting threat at 10 is not, 10 isn't ridiculous levels, but 3 heroes at 10 is 30. You're 10 clear of the secrecy boundary already. I mean, to achieve secrecy, you're looking at 3 heroes starting secrecy. 3 heroes. If you had 3 heroes whose starting threat was 7, you'd have 21. It's so hard to achieve the starting threat. Now, there are threat reduction cards, Vadon's Greetings, Gandalf, Elrond's Council, which is coming out in a later pack, and other little ways to do it, but you've got to draw those to see these. So really, I don't think you can judge. At the moment, certainly, I can't see a way to make a secrecy deck with the cards that are in this cycle. It might be that things came out subsequently that made it more viable, but at the moment, the keyword secrecy, I've had maybe 1 instance in a game where that was possible, and that was so much luck of drawing like the right spirit card at the right time. I'm going to pause the video because the laptop's about to run out of battery. There we go, seamless. So, really, almost all the secrecy cards need to be judged at their full cost. So, thinking about that, needful to know, action, raise your threat by 1 to look at the top card of the encounter deck. Then reduce your threat by X, where X is the threat of that card. Right, so, we're looking at 2 cost, as we said, to do this. So this card relies on knowledge of the encounter deck ready to work. So you're looking at Rumours from the Earth, Downfall, Henmath of the Song, so there's plenty in lore to do it. You're raising your threat by 1 to lower your threat equal to the threat of the card you see. Now it's rare to find a card that's threat is 3 or higher. Only things like the Brown Lands, for instance. Which means generally, let's be generous, if you're looking at a 2 or 3 threat card, you're paying 2 resources because you're raising your threat by 1. If you're lowering it by 2, that's really getting a net loss of 1. Or if you're lowering it by 3 and you've raised it by 1, that's a net gain of 2. You're really paying 2 resources to lower your threat by 1 or 2. Presuming, of course, you knew what was coming in the deck and you had this card in your hand and you had to blah 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 blah. All of those conditions. That doesn't seem great, really. Obviously, with secrecy, if it was free, well, that's much better. We've said how hard that is to achieve. Of course, it is one of those cool secrecy cards that actually keeps your secrecy lower, keeps your threat lower, which is pretty cool. The other issue, one of the reasons that this card is more viable, perhaps, is that it's threat reduction outside of Spirit. Like, threat reduction really has been a very Spirit and Gandalf thing. So to see it in lore is pretty cool. To steal a Team Covenant, it's not setting the world on fire. So our next lore card is a lore ally, the Ravenhill Scout. 3 cost, 0 will, 1 attack, 1 defense, 3 hit points. So that's like a solid defender already, but at 3 cost you'd really want through a decent ability since he can't do much else other than defend. And he's Dale and Scout, which currently does 0. Action, exhaust Ravenhill Scout to move up to 2 progress tokens from one location to another location. So obviously this can be effective if you're currently putting progress tokens on a location, your active location, and you've got horrible little locations in the staging area. Necromancer's Pass, Great Forest Web, anything that has a horrible travel effect. And by exhausting this guy, you can move those from that active location onto the one in the staging area, end it, done. Now, obviously it's situational, and it's quite expensive at 3. You have to exhaust it, which always sucks. But given that he's a defender, you were really only going to hold him back to see what came out of the Encounter deck anyway, so could be useful. One of the problems is that there's like a much better card for doing this in the lore deck coming up in one of the other packs, and it is expensive, but one of the reasons it's expensive is a bit like Needful to Know. Threat reduction was typically a spirit thing. Location progressing in the staging area was a spirit thing as well. So really lore is kind of treading on spirit's toes and paying a bit more for the privilege. Next up, speaking of spirit, we're into spirit now. Another zero-cost event. Hooray! It's Renewed Friendship. I would love to try to be able to say like which bit of the book or whatever that's from. I don't know Lord of the Rings well enough, but it's so freaking cool. I am biased because it's spirit. It has the text response. After another player plays an attachment on a hero you control, you may choose one. Ready one of that player's heroes, have that player draw one card, or lower that player's threat by 2. Right. Obviously, first of all, useless in solo play. A lot of people play this game solo, so this card just gets thrown away. Readying heroes, lowering a threat, and drawing cards are all good abilities, arguably some of the best abilities in the game. It feels so Lord of the Rings because it's ultra cooperative. You know, like, hey, have this Blade of Gondolin. Hey, thanks, buddy, lower your threat. It's horribly situational, of course. Not only must it be in your hand, they must also have an attack. They must be playing attachments, which not everyone does. You know, you really want them to play enough. Great with leadership with all those Dunedain ones, of course, it's worth saying. And they must have an attachment that is actually good on your heroes. Like in the aforementioned party that my friend and I are running at the moment, his is all really attacky and defendy, and mine is mostly questy. So how many of his attachments are going to be applicable to my heroes? Thankfully, then, it is, and that's why this is in my deck. And it's always like a, hey, why not just play that on me? Because given that attachments are usually good, and sometimes it can almost feel like, hey, we could attach this to X, Y, or Z. Hey, let's just give it to Y. By playing this, you've got like, hey, no, put it on here, because really good if you're trying to make what we call an uber character. So, for instance, sometimes when we play, we have Aragorn, and we just put all the attachments on Aragorn. You know, so he's got Celebrity in Stone, Unexpected Courage, Dark Seat, not Dark Knowledge, that would be terrible. Protector of Lorien. Like he's just got attachments coming out the wazoo. I also find that tends to happen with Spirit Glorfindel as well. And this card just makes that great. It's like, hey, well, should we give this to? Yes, we should, because then I can lower your threat, or you can ready a hero or whatever. Readying a hero, I'm not quite sure. It's very situational because you'll be playing the attachment in the planning phase. So the only way they could have had a hero exhausted already would have been through like Berevor's draw cards. But you know, hell, if you can draw 2 cards from Berevor, play an attachment on your friend, and then they ready Berevor, that's pretty awesome. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you'll always want to draw cards, or you'll always want to lower your threat by 2. So I actually quite like Renewed Friendship. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure. Right, next up we get to another spirit card, and this is something that the spirit will be really pleased to see because it's a spirit dwarf. Yes, Boffer. So instant points for being from The Hobbit. 3 cost, 2 willpower, 1 attack, 1 defense, 3 hit points. So it's interesting to compare him instantly to the Ravenhill Scout, who was also 3 cost and also had 1 attack and 1 defense and 3 hit points, but 0 will. So, you know, the Ravenhill Scout's ability is weighed up against Boffer's ability because Boffer has better stats. How is his ability? Of course, he's unique, so that does mean you can only have 1 of him, which means you can include multiples in your deck. It could be a dead card, but he's also a dwarf, which actually does a lot, thanks to Khazad-Dum and Daddy Dan. So, quest action, which is already cool because there aren't many of those. Spend 1 spirit resource to put Boffer into play from your hand, exhausted and committed to the quest. If you quest successfully this phase and Boffer is still in play, return him to your hand. Ah, so cool. So, the fact that he gets to be played from hand is amazing because he's almost like an event that way rather than an ally, which has to be played in a very narrow time frame. Being able to play him for 1, essentially, if you imagine this card said, pay 1 to have +2 quest. That's kind of what he is in that context. That's not terrible. There are plenty of times where your threat's at 29 and the hill troll's there, and you just need to make sure you don't quest unsuccessfully to bump your threat up so that the hill troll engages you. Oh no, we've lost by 1 threat. 1 cost, Boffer's in. It's great. Now, having said that, I think the best circumstance, of course, is where you're actually 2 under questing. You play Boffer, he comes in, adds 2, so you haven't beaten the threat, and you haven't lost to the threat. You've quested neither successfully nor unsuccessfully, and you've played 1 for a 2 spirit, 1 attack, 1 defense, 2 willpower, 1 attack, 1 defense, 3 hit points, spirit ally, who's a dwarf, which means if Dan's in play, he's a boss. Fantastic. And it's really cool artwork. For anyone who's read the first Lord trilogy, weirdly, I always, in my head, this is always how I imagine Baez. I know the beard's too long, but the expression and the determination, it just, so cool. So I quite like Boffer, and it's nice to see a dwarf in the spirit, because, dwarf has sort of been going around everywhere, but, spirit's probably had the fewest dwarfs so far. So, and it's like a questy dwarf, which is pretty cool. Right then, leadership. So, taking initiative with kind of rubbishy artwork. That's harsh. The game has superb artwork. So, this really weird, cartoony sword, it just doesn't really seem in keeping with most of the look of Lord of the Rings, but that's fine. So, it's a 0-cost event. Hooray! Which reads, action. Discard the top card of your deck. If the discarded card's printed cost is equal to or higher than the number of characters you control, draw 2 cards and deal 2 damage to any enemy. Obviously, the effect and the cost of the card are superb, but it is so hard to achieve this effect. For a start, anything requiring cards to be discarded is either ridiculously risky or so luck dependent that you need some sort of deck control. Keen-Eyed Took, Imrad's Stargazer, etc., for it to really pay off. This is achievable, of course, hence why the Zigil Minor was rewritten. But the circumstances required for this card to hit, even if you know the deck, is so difficult. The number of characters you control, at minimum, you will have 3, thanks to your 3 starting heroes, which means you're looking at least a 3+ cost card. That is a ridiculously specific context. This card, similar to Unseen Strike that we saw earlier from the Tactics deck, can and probably will be useless later in a quest. However, Unseen Strike can be very effective. I can only imagine how many planets need to align for this card to be effective. If it was somehow related to the number of allies you have in play, completely different card. But heroes, this is some sort of weird, you can do like a 1-hero deck. Those are pipe dreams, and this is the dream within that pipe. No, I absolutely hate this card. I haven't even sleeved it. So, right, next leadership card is Timely Aid, and it's someone we're going to see later. It's Glorfindel, and he's riding Asphalov, neither of which are leadership cards, but whatever. So Timely Aid, it's a 4-cost event, so it's up there with the really super expensive event. Anything that goes beyond 3 cost is asking even a single sphere deck to pay more than 1 round of resource. Of course, leadership has Steward of Gondor, so it's always had an easy job with resources, which does change things. It's Secrecy! Hooray! We talked about that earlier. It's Secrecy 3, which means if you have threat 20 or lower, you'll only pay 1 for this card. So, it really needs to be judged as a 4 cost. You reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, and you put 1 revealed ally into play, if able. Shuffle all other revealed cards back into your deck. So, yet more control of your deck is required, and at the full cost of 4 that's listed on this card, there are not many allies where you will get a decent return. If you're at Secrecy level, and you have a knowledge of what's coming in your deck, yes, this can be superb. But once again, you're asking for so many difficult circumstances to come together. This is in leadership as well. Leadership does not... Secrecy cards in Spirit are 1,000 times more achievable than they are anywhere else. What is leadership doing to lower your threat? The only possible way I can imagine a leadership deck being able to do this effectively is to sneak attack Gandalfs all day long and plummet your threat down. Oh, and then you also have to have an ability to know what's coming in your deck, really, to get the most out of this. No, hate Timely Aid as well. Right, last card is the compulsory neutral card, and it's a good meal, which is, for anyone who's played the Lord of the Rings MMO, like food is just so Lord of the Rings, so that's a pretty cool card that they put that in. It is pure Hobbit funk, attached to a Hobbit hero. So straight away, a lot of decks can't take this card because it's Hobbit hero, not even Hobbit character, like Fast Hitch. Action: discard good meal to lower the cost of the next event you play this round that matches the attached hero's sphere by 2. So at the moment, Hobbit heroes are Bilbo, who's in lore. There are a lot of good lore events. I don't know how many there are really that are more than 2. And Frodo, who is Spirit. And there are quite a number of, like, well, basically, there's a lot of good Rohan ones that cost a lot. So situational. There still aren't enough heroes to justify a pure Hobbit deck. I could imagine a card like this being really useful in the Black Riders Saga expansion with all those Hobbit heroes. There are tools coming together for a good Hobbit deck, and the card is very thematic. The fact that it's neutral gives you a little bit more deck building choices. But if it was Hobbit character, this would be great. Well, not great. This would be a lot better. Hobbit hero, I don't see good meal making it into any decks. Whew, that was a long unboxing. I had to discuss Secrecy, I guess. So, ultimately, if we just very quickly review, Tactics got 2 cheap cards, both slightly situational, one dripping in theme and one effective in early game, and far more usable than Secrecy. Lore, Secrecy, boo, but threat lowering possibilities on one of their cards, and the Ravenhill Scout is expensive, but once again, it has like a Spirit-esque effect. So Lore basically trying to be an expensive version of Spirit. Spirit, Renewed Friendship is thematic, but needs your friend to build a deck for it. And Bother is effective, and he's a dwarf, so all the dwarf boosting cards that your friend has always been taking, but you can't take advantage of in the Spirit state. Sorry, there is a dwarf, of course, but he's bloody awful. Dwarf hero that came in, Khazad-Dum, whose name I'm Dwalin. And then Leadership, a complete load of rubbish. 2 events that aren't great, but they gained a great hero. And while player cards are great, heroes are the foundation of every great party. So there we go. That's the Redhorn Gate.